Mr. Bongino, you occupy the seat of FBI Deputy Director, yet your history demonstrates that you have turned law enforcement into a weapon against immigrants and Muslims. Ilhan Omar's voice echoed across the congressional chamber, piercing and filled with accusation, utilizing that distinct tone she adopts whenever the cameras are recording. She stood positioned at her microphone, her designer hijab arranged flawlessly, her facial expression conveying righteous indignation. This was the specific moment she had been waiting for, the hearing she had personally demanded, and the stage she intended to utilize to dismantle Dan Bongino on national television. Tonight, she went on, growing more animated with her topic, I intend to reveal your prejudice, your corruption, and your discriminatory agenda for the entire world to witness. The progressive wing of the audience burst into loud cheering, having arrived early to fill the room, eager to witness their squad leader defeat Trump's appointee to the FBI. Cameras from C-SPAN recorded every second, with CNN, MSNBC, and Fox News all present to cover what was undeniably the hearing everyone had been anticipating. The official designation was the Congressional Oversight Committee on Immigration System Integrity, yet every person present understood the true nature of the event. It was effectively a show trial featuring Ilhan Omar versus Dan Bongino, pitting the rising star of the squad against Trump's controversial deputy director. She had dedicated weeks to preparation, while her staff gathered opposition research, practiced her offensive lines, and coordinated alongside sympathetic media outlets. She felt completely prepared, while Dan Bongino sat quietly at the witness table, a 50-year-old former NYPD officer and Secret Service agent who was a Queens native to his core. He was dressed in a dark suit paired with a white shirt and red tie, the classic federal look, but his face displayed an emotion Omar had not foreseen. He appeared neither nervous nor defensive, but rather seemed to be suppressing a smile, that subtle quirk of the mouth a police officer gets when a suspect is about to say something incredibly foolish. The American public has a right to know, Omar insisted, that you have utilized your authority to target at-risk communities, to harass refugees, and to enforce Trump's discriminatory immigration protocols. You profess to care about the rule of law, yet your actual motivation is prejudice against individuals who share my appearance, which drew more cheers and the flashing of camera bulbs. She believed she was winning the exchange, or at least that was her perception, until Bongino leaned closer to his microphone and the Queen's accent became unmistakable when he finally spoke. He projected the energy of a working-class New York street cop rather than the refined Washington dialect everyone had anticipated, speaking with a voice that was calm yet commanded authority. Congresswoman, he began, before we discuss my history, let us discuss yours, specifically regarding immigration fraud, marriage fraud, perjury, tax fraud, and violations of campaign finance laws. He hesitated for a moment to let the words resonate, explaining that he had been a law enforcement officer for 20 years, including 4 with the NYPD and a dozen with the Secret Service. I have investigated numerous fraud cases and arrested many criminals, so I recognize fraud instantly when I see it, he added, pausing again as the room fell into a stunned silence. Omar's smile had become rigid as Bongino leaned forward with his eyes fixed intensely on hers, stating that she was committing multiple federal offenses, and they were going to discuss every single one. We will do this right here, and right now on national television, he declared, retrieving a thick folder organized with tabs and visible documents. You expressed a desire to discuss the integrity of the immigration system, so let us begin with how you defrauded that very system by entering into a marriage with your own brother. The room erupted in chaos, while Omar's expression shifted from righteous confidence to frozen shock in a fraction of a second, and her staff members exchanged panicked glances. Her attorneys leaned in anxiously, realizing this was not the script they had planned, and certainly not how this encounter was supposed to unfold. "If you wish to discuss the integrity of the immigration system," Bongino repeated, settling back into his chair with his police instincts fully engaged, "then let us discuss your marriage to Ahmed Noor Saeed Elmi. He is a British citizen who, according to substantial evidence, happens to be your biological brother," Bongino stated, as he opened the folder and extracted the initial batch of papers. "I have worked on cases involving Secret Service matters, financial crimes, identity theft, and marriage fraud, so I have seen everything, but this particular case is textbook. Let me explain exactly how I know you married your sibling to commit immigration fraud," he said, even as Omar attempted to interrupt by calling the documents disgusting and racist conspiracy theories. "The documents are not racist, Congresswoman," Bongino replied firmly, his voice not angry but matter-of-fact, noting that evidence is not racist and facts are not racist. "Let us examine the facts," he said, holding up the first document to show that in 2009 she legally married Ahmed Noor Saeed Elmi, a fact she had already admitted. The marriage certificate was filed with Hennepin County in Minnesota in August of 2009, when she was approximately 26 or 27 years old, though he did not pause for an answer. This is where the situation becomes interesting regarding who Ahmed Noor Saeed Elmi actually is, as I obtained his educational records from the United Kingdom. He attended secondary school there before arriving in the United States, and Bongino displayed official-looking papers bearing British government seals that listed his father's name as Noor Saeed Elmi. That is his father, and now let us examine your refugee application documents from 1995 when your own family arrived in America, he said, holding up another paper. He placed the documents side by side to show that the father's name was Noor Saeed Elmi, which was the same name with the exact same spelling. He looked at the committee members, then at the cameras, and finally at Omar, stating that he was just a cop from Queens without fancy degrees in mathematics. However, where I come from, when two individuals list the identical man as their father, that makes them siblings, specifically brother and sister within a family. Someone in the gallery audibly gasped, while camera shutters clicked rapidly. But Bongino continued, keeping his voice steady as he built the case piece by piece. "That is merely one piece of evidence," he explained, offering to provide more from social media, specifically Instagram, as he produced printouts and held them aloft. "These are from Ahmed Elmi's Instagram account before you deleted everything and attempted to scrub the internet. But as they say, the internet preserves everything forever. These are archived posts," he said, beginning to read a post from 2013 where Ahmed Elmi posted a photo with your daughter from your previous relationship with Ahmed Hirsi. In the caption, he refers to her as his niece rather than his stepdaughter, which is a very interesting choice of words given the circumstances. If he were simply your husband, she would be his stepdaughter, because that is how marriage works. But he calls her his niece, because that is what she would be if he were your brother. Omar was shaking her head in denial, but remained silent, while her lawyers whispered urgently to her. Yet Bongino declared that there was even more evidence. "Let me inform you about an email retrieved through a Freedom of Information Act request sent from Ahmed Elmi to you in 2011, and I will read it slowly. It says, 'Thanks for helping me get papers, sister, and I will make sure to pay you back when I get to London.'" Silence filled the room, dead silence, as Bongino repeated the word sister, letting it hang in the air to emphasize that he did not say wife. "He called you sister in an email regarding assistance with obtaining immigration papers, which is exactly what this arrangement was about from the beginning. You married your brother to help him acquire United States citizenship, or, at the very least, a student visa, in-state tuition benefits, and an easier path to permanent residence. I am not finished, as I have 6 affidavits, which are sworn statements made under penalty of perjury from members of the Minneapolis Somali community who knew your family. They all state that Ahmed Nur Saeed Elmi is your brother, identifying him independently and under oath as your sibling, including one specific woman named Mrs. Fadumo Hassan. She knew your family prior to the Civil War and is very specific, stating without doubt or confusion that Ahmed Elmi is your biological brother. Bongino organized his papers and looked directly at Omar, suggesting they discuss the timeline because that is where the fraud becomes crystal clear. In 2002, you had an Islamic marriage ceremony with Ahmed Hirsi that was religious but not legal, and you had 2 children with him in 2006 and 2008. You separated from Hirsi in 2008 via a religious divorce, which was not legal since you were never legally married, and then in 2009 you immediately legally married Ahmed Elmi. He is the man sharing your father, your brother. But the truly interesting part is that from 2009 to 2011, you, Ahmed Hirsi, and Ahmed Elmi all lived at the same address. All 3 of you resided in a Columbia Heights, Minnesota apartment building in the same unit, he said, producing lease documents, utility bills, and voter registration records. You were living with the father of your children and your legal husband, who just happens to be your brother, at the same time under the same roof. Someone in the audience asked what loudly enough to be heard, as Bongino explained that in 2009, immediately after marrying you, Ahmed Elmi enrolled at North Dakota State University. That is your alma mater, and marriage to a U.S. citizen grants you in-state tuition, which is significantly cheaper than out-of-state or international rates. It also makes you eligible for U.S. student aid programs and provides legal status to stay in the country, Bongino noted as he leaned forward. He graduated in 2012, moved to Minneapolis, was evicted from public housing, and then returned to the UK where he is right now, having accomplished his mission. He retrieved one final document, calling it the smoking gun, which was her divorce filing from 2017 that she signed under penalty of perjury. That means lying on it is a felony. And in that filing, you claimed that you had no contact with Ahmed Nur Saeed Elmi since June of 2011. He placed that document down and produced photos from London in 2015, 4 years after you claimed you had no contact, showing you and Ahmed Elmi together. It is clearly you and clearly him together in archived Instagram photos, he said, looking at Omar and stating that she had committed perjury. You lied under oath in a court document, which is a felony separate from the marriage fraud and the immigration fraud, constituting its own federal crime. Omar found her voice, which was shaky and defensive, claiming this was all taken out of context and that these were debunked conspiracy theories from racist bloggers. Bongino's voice became sharp as he retorted that nothing he had just presented had been debunked, including the UK government documents showing the father's name. Your refugee application showing the same father is not debunked, the email calling you sister is not debunked, and the 6 sworn affidavits have not been debunked. He paused to suggest that one simple thing would debunk all of this, explaining that a DNA test would settle the matter instantly. If Ahmed Elmi is not your brother, a DNA test proves it simply and easily within an hour by swabbing your cheek and his cheek. The lab results would come back showing you are not related. The story would end. You would be vindicated, and everyone who accused you would look like a fool. The Daily Mail requested you take a DNA test in 2019, and you refused. Multiple other outlets requested it, and you refused. And members of Congress requested it, and you refused. I will tell you why you refused, he said, leaning back. Because you know what that test would show, and you know Ahmed Elmi is your brother. You cannot risk that test because it would prove beyond any doubt that you committed federal immigration fraud, causing Omar to shake her head with tears forming. I will not dignify these racist attacks, she cried. But Bongino's voice went cold with a street cop edge as he told her something about his past. I worked the 75th Precinct in East New York, Brooklyn, which is one of the most dangerous neighborhoods in New York City, and I dealt with every ethnicity. I arrested people of every color and creed because I cared about evidence, crime, and fraud. So this is not about your race or religion. This is about multiple federal crimes, as immigration fraud is a federal crime punishable by up to 5 years in prison and a fine of up to $250,000. For immigrants who commit immigration fraud, the penalty is deportation, he said, letting that reality sink in, reminding her that she came to this country as a refugee. This country saved your life and your family, gave you opportunities and citizenship, and eventually a seat in Congress. And you repaid it by defrauding the immigration system. You gamed it by marrying your brother to help him get benefits he was not entitled to, and his voice rose slightly as he explained what that does. It makes every legitimate refugee suspect, makes people doubt the system, and causes Americans who are already skeptical about immigration to see that fraud occurs. You harm every honest refugee and immigrant because you could not follow the rules, he said, closing that section of his folder regarding marriage fraud and perjury. That constitutes 3 federal felonies right there. And we are just getting started, because we have not even talked about your taxes yet. Omar sat frozen while her attorneys wrote frantically and her staffers were on their phones, and the progressive section of the gallery had gone completely silent. Bongino pulled out a new section from his folder to discuss her tax returns, asking if she knew what he learned working financial fraud cases. Follow the money, because money does not lie even if people do, and bank records and tax returns always tell the truth. He held up a new set of papers showing her federal tax returns from 2014 and 2015, asking if she understood what married filing jointly means. It means you are filing taxes as a married couple with your legal spouse, he said, setting down the returns where Omar's signature was visible. In 2014, you filed joint tax returns with Ahmed Abdullahi Hirsi, the father of your children and the man you had a religious ceremony with in 2002. In 2015, you did the same thing, filing joint returns with Ahmed Hirsi. But Bongino looked up at her to explain there was a big problem. You were legally married to Ahmed Elmi, not Ahmed Hirsi, because Elmi is your brother and that marriage was still valid. You did not legally divorce him until 2017, he said, placing the marriage certificate and divorce filing date side by side to illustrate the discrepancy. So in 2014 and 2015, you filed joint tax returns with a man you were not legally married to while being legally married to a different man entirely. That is tax fraud, Congresswoman. And he read from Title 26 of the United States Code regarding making false statements on tax returns. Any person who willfully makes a return verified by a written declaration under penalty of perjury, which they do not believe to be true, is guilty of a felony. The penalty is up to 3 years in prison, up to $100,000 in fines, plus the taxes owed, penalties, and interest. Omar tried to respond that she corrected those filings, but Bongino finished for her by stating she only did so after she got caught. You corrected them after the Minnesota Campaign Finance Board investigated you and after journalists started asking questions, not before the story became public. Correcting fraud after you are caught does not make it not fraud, it just makes it admitted fraud. And you signed those returns under penalty of perjury. You certified that everything on those returns was true, yet you claimed to be married to Ahmed Hirsi, when you were actually married to Ahmed Elmi. That is material information, not a small mistake or a technicality, but pure fraud, though perhaps you just forgot you were married to your brother. Maybe it slipped your mind. So let us talk about something where you definitely did not forget. Specifically, perjury, he said, pulling out a court document. It was a divorce filing from August 2017 in Hennepin County District Court, where you petitioned to divorce Ahmed Nur Saeed Elmi. In this filing, you make several statements under oath under penalty of perjury, which is lying under oath and constitutes a serious federal and state crime. He found the section regarding the application for service by alternate means, where she claimed she could not find Ahmed Elmi to serve him papers. You state under penalty of perjury that you have had no contact with Ahmed Nur Saeed Elmi since June of 2011, he said, setting the document down. June 2011 is what you swore to under oath, in a legal filing with your signature right above the line declaring, "Everything stated is true." I have been a cop for 20 years and testified in court countless times, so I know that if you lie on that document, you go to prison. He pulled out a manila envelope and slowly opened it to reveal Instagram posts from June 2015 in London, England. He laid out clear photos of you and Ahmed Elmi together in London, 4 years after you claimed you had no contact with him. That is you in the designer hijab, and that is Ahmed Elmi, the same person from the marriage certificate photo, causing Omar's face to go pale. So in June 2011, you supposedly stopped contact with your brother-husband, but in 2015, you are photographed with him, and in 2017, you filed documents claiming otherwise. That is clear and undeniable perjury, as you lied under oath in a court filing about material facts, which is a state and likely federal felony. Omar claimed the photos did not prove anything, but Bongino interrupted to say they prove you were together and that you lied in your divorce filing. When somebody lies about one thing, you start doubting everything they say. And Congresswoman, you have a pattern here of marriage fraud, tax fraud, and perjury. That represents 4 separate federal felonies that are all documented and provable, he said, his voice becoming quieter but more intense. I protected presidents for 12 years, including George W. Bush and Barack Obama, following every rule and protocol by the book because that was my job. You are in Congress making laws you are supposed to follow, but instead you commit crimes and call anyone who investigates you a racist. I am a cop who investigates crimes, and when the evidence is this strong, we make arrests. Though I cannot arrest you as I am not that kind of law enforcement anymore. However, the evidence is public, and everyone watching knows exactly what you did, he said, as Omar began crying and calling this a witch hunt. You are being persecuted because you broke the law multiple times, he stated, pulling out the next section to discuss her campaign finances and Tim Minute. Let us talk about how you used campaign funds to pay for your affair, Bongino said, pulling out a thick stack of Federal Election Commission filings. Tim Minette was a married political consultant who ran a firm called E Street Group, and I know this because FEC filings are public record. In 2018, your campaign started paying E Street Group for consulting services and travel expenses, and he held up a calculator to tally the amounts. In 2018, it was approximately $190,000, and in 2019, another $180,000, totaling $370,000 to one firm. Consulting is not inherently wrong, but having an affair with your consultant while paying him massive amounts of campaign money is certainly not normal. Omar tried to interrupt regarding her personal relationships, but Bongino told her to stop, because this ceases to be personal when donor money and federal laws are involved. He produced a court document from Beth Minette, Tim's wife, who filed for divorce in April 2019 and stated clearly in the documents what happened. My husband Tim told me he was having an affair with Ilhan Omar and wanted to dissolve our marriage. Bongino read directly from the legal filing. Beth Minette swore under oath that her husband confessed to the affair while his firm was receiving hundreds of thousands of dollars from your campaign. She also testified in a deposition that Tim told her not to worry about money because Ilhan's campaign was covering everything. The room went completely silent as that statement hung in the air, revealing that campaign funds were covering everything, including money from working people. He pointed to specific expenses in March 2019 for travel to California, which may have been a campaign event or perhaps a romantic getaway. In April 2019, the same month the affair was admitted, there were more travel expenses and huge consulting fees paid every single month. He pulled out credit card records showing dinners, hotels, and flights charged to the campaign while you were having an affair and both married to other people. Beth Minette had a career and a life, and you destroyed her marriage and family while using campaign funds to do it, which is particularly disgusting. Omar was shaking her head with tears streaming, calling this unfair, but Bongino's Queen's accent thickened as he told her what was actually unfair. It is unfair to take money from working people who believe in you and use it to fund your affair, which constitutes theft and fraud. In March 2020, you married Tim Minette after his divorce was finalized, and you divorced Ahmed Hirsi, but the payments did not stop there. The 2020 FEC filings show the payments increased to over $1 million, more than triple the previous years combined, and another million in 2021. You are now paying your husband's consulting firm massive amounts of campaign money, meaning your donors are essentially funding your household income. That is a textbook conflict of interest and potentially illegal coordination, effectively laundering campaign funds into personal income, he said, reading the FEC regulations aloud. Federal law prohibits using campaign funds for personal use, which includes payments to family members beyond fair market value or payments that primarily benefit the candidate. You are paying your husband over $1 million a year, which does not seem like fair market value but rather like using campaign money to support your household. Omar claimed the FEC was investigating, but Bongino corrected her that multiple ethics complaints have been filed and the investigation is ongoing. I have seen corruption in my 20 years, including bribes and lobbyists, but this is cruder than most of it, he said, gesturing at the documents. You had an affair, used campaign money to fund it, destroyed a marriage, then married the guy and kept funneling donor money to him. That is personal enrichment and fraud, and you did all this while claiming to fight for the struggling and poor who donated to you. He closed that section of the folder, tallying up the felonies, but noted there was something even more fundamental they needed to discuss. Let us talk about what you did to the refugee system that saved your life, Bongino said, his tone shifting to become less like a cop and more personal. You came to this country as a refugee in 1995 when you were 12 or 13 years old, fleeing the terrible civil war in Somalia. You spent 4 years in the Dadaab refugee camp in Kenya, witnessing horrific conditions before America accepted you and your family and granted you refugee status. You settled in Minnesota, received help and opportunities, learned English, went to North Dakota State University, and became a naturalized citizen in 2000. 19 years later, you are in Congress, which is the American dream and proof that the system works, and that opportunity exists here. However, you did not just benefit from the system. You exploited and betrayed it by marrying your brother to help him circumvent the rules. You turned around and defrauded the very system that saved your life, which makes every legitimate refugee suspect and causes asylum seekers to be doubted. You proved the skeptics right, validating everyone who says refugees commit fraud and that we need stricter vetting, Bongino said, his voice rising. I have protected people for 20 years and worked with honest immigrants who follow the rules and are grateful for the opportunity to contribute. Then there is you, who came here and received every advantage only to commit federal crimes multiple times and hide behind identity politics when questioned. Omar tried to say he did not understand, but Bongino sharply cut her off, asking what exactly he did not understand about being an immigrant. My grandparents were Italian immigrants who came through Ellis Island, worked their whole lives, followed every rule, and never asked for handouts. I grew up in a working-class neighborhood in Queens where my father was a city worker and nobody handed me anything, so I worked for everything I have. I became a cop in the dangerous streets of East New York, worked my way up to the Secret Service, and followed every single rule. You broke the rules repeatedly and deliberately, and you claim anyone who calls you out is attacking you because of your identity. But this is not about that. This is about federal crimes, fraud, lying, corruption, and betraying the system, he said, noting that while he believes in helping refugees, we must trust the system. I want to ask you some very simple questions, and I want you to answer them yes or no, he said, settling into interrogation mode. Innocent people answer questions because they are eager to clear their names, while guilty people deflect and attack the questioner, just as you have done today. He pulled out a legal pad and pen, stating he would ask simple yes or no questions, starting with whether Ahmed Nur Saeed Elmi is her brother. Omar looked at her lawyers and then claimed the allegations were baseless, but Bongino interrupted to demand a simple yes or no answer. I have already addressed this, she said, to which Bongino replied that her refusal to answer was noted, and he would move on to the next question. Question 2 is whether you filed joint tax returns with Ahmed Hirsi in 2014 and 2015 while legally married to Ahmed Elmi. She mentioned correcting the filings, which Bongino took as a yes, confirming she filed joint returns with someone she was not married to. He asked if she filed those returns as described, and when she remained silent, he noted it as a yes, since she did not deny it. Question 3 asked if she stated under penalty of perjury in her 2017 divorce filing that she had no contact with Ahmed Elmi since 2011. She admitted legal documents have specific language, which Bongino accepted as the first straight answer, writing it down before moving to question 4. Were you photographed with Ahmed Elmi in London in 2015, 4 years after you claimed you had no contact? He asked. But she shook her head. She refused to answer regarding the photos, so he noted that as interesting and moved to question 5 regarding the payments to Tim Mynette's company. Did your campaign pay his company approximately $370,000 between 2018 and 2019? To which she replied that expenditures are disclosed. That is a yes, he said, asking question 6 about whether she was having an affair with Tim Mynette during this time period. She blushed and claimed it was her personal life, but Bongino noted that Beth Mynette testified under oath, so he would mark it as confirmed. Question 7 asked if campaign payments increased to over $1 million after she married Tim Mynette in 2020. She deflected again, so Bongino said he would check the public FEC filings himself, confirming that the payments indeed increased substantially. 7 questions and 7 deflections with not one honest response, he said. standing up to declare that this is what guilt looks like. Innocent people provide evidence to clear their names, but you attack me, claim racism, hide behind your identity, and use your religion as a shield. The evidence does not care about your feelings or political correctness, as I have government documents, court filings, tax returns, and sworn testimony. You have only accusations of racism and a refusal to take a DNA test, which is something I have never seen an innocent person refuse. You will not take it because it would prove you married your brother, which would end your career, your freedom, and possibly your citizenship. Omar was sobbing now, calling this harassment, but Bongino told her she could leave if she wanted, just as guilty people often do. Everyone watching knows the truth that you committed multiple felonies, but you might be wondering why you have not been arrested yet. In 2016, the U.S. Attorney for Minnesota under Obama declined to investigate, and in 2017 prosecutors feared that prosecuting a squad member would be political suicide. You are protected by political considerations, and going after you looks like persecution even though the evidence against you is overwhelming. The statute of limitations is a problem for the marriage fraud from 2009 and, potentially, the tax fraud, but the perjury from 2017 is still prosecutable. However, prosecutors are scared of the media backlash and do not want to be accused of targeting you because of your identity as a minority woman. That is the system we have, where there are different rules for people who are politically protected. But Tom Homan from the Trump administration is reviewing everything. We are looking at what legal options remain, and there is the possibility of denaturalization if citizenship was obtained through fraud. If you married your brother to get him citizenship, your own citizenship can be revoked, followed by deportation back to Somalia, which is the law. Omar's eyes widened with fear, but Bongino told her she should have followed the rules instead of defrauding the system that gave her opportunity. You might get away with it due to political protection, but history will record that you committed federal crimes and hid behind identity politics. The American people are not stupid, and they know you married your brother, committed tax fraud, and funneled campaign money to your lover. When he finished, the hearing room erupted, and although Omar rushed out surrounded by lawyers, she could not escape the internet. Clips went viral immediately with hashtags about brother marriage and tax fraud trending worldwide, and even progressive media outlets struggled to defend her. Within 3 days, a petition was started by Ahmed Hassan, a Somali refugee who was furious that she had betrayed the system he respected. His petition demanding an investigation gained 500,000 signatures in 2 weeks, and he gave interviews stating she made it harder for legitimate refugees. Sarah Mitchell, a friend of Beth Minette, started another petition regarding campaign finance violations, while conservative legal groups filed formal complaints. Tom Homan confirmed on television that they were reviewing everything and that deportation was a possibility, a clip that went viral and terrified progressives. Fundraising collapsed, primary challengers emerged, and 6 months later, Omar announced she would not seek re-election to spend time with family. It was clear her career was over, and although she escaped charges for the moment, the investigation by Homan continues to this day. Everyone knows she married her brother, committed tax fraud, lied under oath, and repaid America's generosity by defrauding the immigration system. Ilhan Omar rose to Congress and fell because she committed federal crimes and thought she could hide behind identity politics. But she was wrong. Dan Bongino exposed the corruption with facts, and while she tried to destroy him, she ended up destroying herself instead. If this story opened your eyes, share it so people understand the truth, because politicians like Omar need to be exposed and the corrupt must face consequences.